Welcome to another episode of the Middle-earth Play-by-Mail fan channel. What I'm wanting to talk about today are the way that nation relations are so important to so many aspects of the game. Now, you play a nation within Middle-earth Play-by-Mail, and there can be as many as 24 other nations in the game. Your nation has an official set relation to every other position in the game, every other nation in the game. And it's one of 5 levels. If you really like them, you will be friendly. Otherwise, it's just tolerated, but that's still a positive view of them. If you have no view either way, it's in the middle and it's neutral. Ones that you start out as enemies to you are disliked. And if you really want maximum dislike of an enemy nation, you can put them at the worst status of being hated. Now, if you start out on committed to one side, either Free Peoples or Dark Servants, you will begin with everyone on your team being set at tolerated to you and you to them, and everyone on the opposing team, so if you're a Free People over to the Dark Servants, being set at disliked, and they will dislike you. Any nation which starts out as an independent neutral, well, they're neutral to you, and everybody else, and you are neutral to them. You can change your relations with another nation up or down by using orders 180, upgrade relations, or 185, downgrade relations. And if that's successful, it will move it by 1 notch. Normally, you only ever move nations that are enemies from disliked to hated, or enemies or teams that are friends from liked to friendly, or neutrals. You have to do it a few times to get the maximum bonus from them. But you might be asking, well, what's the point of this? Well, the relationship your nation has with others has a significant effect on the outcome of your interactions with them. For a start, in the combat mechanics, in battles, if you dislike a nation that you're having a battle with, you get a 10% bonus to your combat strength. If you hate your opponent, that becomes a 25% bonus. So just with one order issued by a commander at your capital to say, you know those Naldo elves we're going to have a battle with? Well, we thought they were dodgy. Turns out they're right cads, and we ought to give them a good shoeing because we hate them. Just by doing that will increase the damage each and every one of your troops will do against their Naldo opponents. So if you're going into a battle, really make sure you hate your enemy. But it's not just there in battles. If you read through the descriptions of order after order in the rulebook, you will see they all have a section where it says the chances of this order working are down to da-da-da-da-da-da, and it lists a whole load of factors that affect your chances of being successful. And more often than not, your relationship to the nation you're targeting and their relationship to you is a factor. So for lots of opposed orders, stealing things, kidnapping, assassination, sabotage, influencing the loyalty of enemy population centres, you are more likely to be successful if you have a worse relation to them. How it works is that it compares your relation to them and theirs to you. And the more that you hate them compared to their view of you, the greater your bonus. So if you're going to go and trying to assassinate someone, if you hate the nation of the character you're trying to assassinate, but they only dislike you, you've got 1 bonus notch, as it were, from national relations, and that will give you the advantage in all of those opposed orders targeting that nation. This is very useful indeed. This one order can have a multiplier effect across all of your agents, all of your emissaries who are going out looking to do opposed orders against enemies. But good nation relations are also required for some cooperative orders happening between friendly nations, between allies. if you're wanting to transfer ships from one army to another, if you're wanting to take food from an allied pop center, then there needs to be friendly relations from the country that's doing the giving to the country that is receiving. So even upgrading your allies can have unlock all sorts of extra bonuses in terms of what you can do. So obviously having your relations set against your enemies to as bad as possible, you want to hate them all, and with some of your strategic partners making sure they're moved to friendly is really important. But of course you only have so many orders, and 180 and 185 upgrade and downgrade relations have to be done in your capital and have to be done by a commander, and it takes up one of their command slots. So other really important command slots, such as naming new characters or changing tax rate or hiring or recruiting armies, cannot be done by a character who is also changing relations. So you have to decide where changing relations fits in priority with those other important orders. Note that this underlines why I've said in my previous video on the importance of capitals, why having at least a couple of commanders in your capital is really important. Well, I would normally say that changing the tax rate, if you're needing at some point to move your tax rate from the starting position of 40 upwards towards, say, 60, it's normally better to get that in place before you start changing relations towards other nations. Partly because that's something you want to do as soon as you can, and you're only going to be doing offensive things against other nations in turn 1, 2, maybe 3. So you've got a couple of turns to try and get your tax sorted first of all. Naming characters, particularly early in the game, is also really important, and unless there's a very pressing need, should take a priority. Note that if you are naming characters, you can start to chain orders as you go through your first 2 turns. So if you've only got one commander in your capital in the very first turn, he can name another commander. Next turn, you've got 2 commanders in your capital. So one of those can name another commander, and the original commander can go and do something like changing tax rate. So getting commanders and other characters named early is really important. MEPBM is primarily a character-based game because that's how you interact with the world, through issuing orders through characters. So the more you have, the more options you have. But after sorting out tax rate and sorting out character naming, and also remembering that you're probably needing in most positions to be keeping recruitment going, and usually your capital is one of your best places to do that because it will be one of your largest pop centers. Making sure at that point that you just have a steady program, maybe each turn or every other turn, that you're downgrading the enemies that matter the most is perhaps one of the most important things you can be doing at your capital. So, what order should you do it in? Well, downgrading enemies is more important at first than upgrading your friends, partly because upgrading friends is only really important for a couple of reasons. The first one is if you're going to be doing those cooperative orders of transferring things between armies, and that doesn't usually happen in the first few turns of the game. Or alternatively, it's sometimes useful if somebody is wanting to, on your side, is wanting a mid-level agent to practice their steel gold skill to increase their agent rank quickly. You can upgrade them to friendly so that if they just keep you at tolerated, their agent will get a bonus when trying to practice by stealing gold in one of your camps. But again, they're unlikely to have an agent in that situation early on. So normally the priority is whoever it is you're going to be fighting, and whoever it is on your doorstep, whoever it is you know you're going to be sending an army against or is likely to send an army against you, make sure you downgrade them. Moving from plus 10% to plus 25% in terms of the damage your troops do is a big deal, and you need to make sure you get that in place for your main enemies that you're going to be fighting in the early turns. And after that, I would say that you should look to downgrade any enemy nations who are likely to have agents that are assassin ready. So look at the Cloud Lord, maybe the Ice King, look at Long Rider if you're on the Free People side. If you're on the Dark Servant side, look at those pesky elves, particularly Noldor. Maybe think about Woodman at some point. It's just to make the task of those agents that little bit harder. After you've done some of the agent nations, the emissary nations are the ones that are likely to start doing offensive actions where it is important. So just to give you a bit of protection against influence other, target some of the emissary-based nations if you can. So ones such as maybe Quiet Avenger or Northmen or again Noldo. So they're the enemies to downgrade. Now, just to note, if you know you've got a battle coming up, make sure you get your downgrade order done a turn or two in advance of that battle if you can, just for insurance. If you can't, you can leave it to the turn, because obviously downgrading order 185 will happen before battles. So within the turn you can issue the order to downgrade a nation, and then fractionally later within your turn you come to the combat phases, and at that point, if you've managed to downgrade relations, that will take effect. But it's not a guaranteed order. You can try with a commander about rank 30, but that's a bit iffy. Rank 40 has a very good chance of achieving it. Above rank 40, you know, into the mid 40s, you're pretty much guaranteed. But it's very frustrating if you have a mid-ranking commander, say in the high 30s, you bank on them to issue the order to change relations, and they fluff it, and you go in only at disliked, and you really struggle in the battle as a result. So try and plan ahead. If you know you're going to be battling someone, make sure you get them downgraded, and once it's done, that holds for the rest of the game. After you've done the enemy nations with strong agents, the emissaries, then go on and do the rest, because obviously over time they will be developing their own agents, their own emissaries, recruiting armies, and you've got to fight them at some point. You only really need to upgrade friendly relations as it's needed. So as you're planning ahead your logistics, if you know you're going to have two armies meeting up in a hex and you want to refuel one by transferring food across or giving some armor or whatever you might do, make sure you get that done in time for that. But it's most important to blunt the effect of enemy nations by downgrading them to hated. Friendly nations and those sort of cooperative transfer orders are much less common. Ideally, by about turn 10 in the game, when you've got more characters at your disposal, you can have several commanders in your capital, and you can probably have at least one of them up to about rank 40, 45 dedicated each turn or most turns, issuing an upgrade or a downgrade order alongside a miscellaneous nation order, such as selling something or moving goods around. So that's the overall view and the importance of nation relations. Just a couple of notes, and that is, if you're in a game which doesn't have preset neutrals and you're playing as a neutral, you will start as being neutral to everyone else. Now, there are only certain orders you can do if you dislike your enemy, so do read up on those. And if you're a neutral, you will find at the point where you're just about to or have just declared that you're going to join either the Free People or the Dark Servants, you will need to suddenly start downgrading your enemies and upgrading some of your new allies super fast, because you need to get them onto at least dislike to start initiating some combats. For some of your allies, if they're going to be moving troops through, if you're only neutral and you bump into each other, you will stop each other's movement, because the two armies will just stand there and have a bit of a Mexican standoff. So for neutrals, you can reach a point where it suddenly becomes critical to be doing 2 or 3 or more change relations orders in your capital every turn, and really making sure you prioritize the right nations at the right time. Now, of course, as a neutral, when you change, your enemies will probably only have you at neutral as well. So if you can suddenly get them to hated and you move in your agents or you move in your army, you will have a big bonus because you hate them, they're neutral to you. You will have a big bonus from that. One thing to note, however, is there is the spell Perceive Relations, which exists. It's quite an easy spell to get hold of and to cast. And if a team is concerned as to whether a neutral is going to go one way or another, they will be casting this spell on you just to double check. And if you cast Perceive Relations on a neutral who's next door to you and is saying, yeah, it's fine, we're not going to attack you, we'll be friends, yeah, and you suddenly find out you've been downgraded to hated by them, you know what's happening, at which point all of your team can just pile in on them. Anyway, I think that's covered just about everything I want to say on nation relations. It's an order that you need to get done in your capital at some point. When it's done and it's set right, it's set for the whole of the game, and it does have an influence on so many different outcomes: battles, opposed orders, cooperative, ally interactions. So do consider it as one aspect of what you need to be doing with your characters as you plan out turn by turn. This has been the Middle-earth Play by Mail fan channel. I hope you found it interesting. If you like it, do leave a comment below. It's very encouraging when people say hello and that they're enjoying it. And do subscribe to the channel if you want to see more stuff as I prepare it. Bye for now.